Okay, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth White, your soul purpose coach, and I'm here today with Jamie London Wahlberg, and we're going to discuss whether or not you can have a spiritual awakening without trauma. Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. I'm so excited and honored. Namaste, everyone. I am Jamie, and I'm a plant-powered healer, intuitive chef, and spiritual wellness coach. And I am honored to serve you and be completely transparent as I channel and share and discuss this topic that is very close to my heart.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for our discussion today. And I want to know why it is that you wanted to talk about trauma and spiritual awakening.
Well, it's my truth. To have a waking spiritually within trauma. I had a try awakening that had to do with medical trauma, identity, gender transition, that had to do with other types, of trauma, and addressing really a lot of trauma, more than I could imagine. And then in addition, my spiritual awakening all at the same time. And at the time, I had been stripped of essentially everything. That's what it felt like. I had lost the love of my life. I had lost, this future that I was building, a baby that I cared for that was in the mix of all of that. I lost my career. I lost friends. I
Wow.
lost freedom. I was completely bedridden for, I think, about 10 months initially.
Yeah.
And at the time, they didn't know what's going on. And when you have a lot of time to think and you're pretty desperate, and somehow inside of you, even though you haven't really woken in yet, that you are meant to help people in some way, shape, or form, one can get pretty pissed being laid up, knowing that. And for the first time ever, I prayed. I asked, what my purpose was. What was this about? And no, I didn't jump out of bed the next moment. But these
Mm.
9 years that I've gone through since that day or maybe 8 years since that particular moment, I have experienced also prior lots and lots and lots of different traumas that have really just shown me my true self. Because, right, when we have trauma, we can often do two things. We can go in and inward and shrink ourselves inward and be in victim consciousness and bring us into a space where perhaps we're even nonverbal, right? We're having a trauma response, somatic response, and we can't communicate perhaps the way that we would typically want to communicate or need to communicate our needs. And then you have the other side, which is ultimately, you know, someone who I lost my thoughts. Yeah, that's what's funny. They're wanting me to now change what I was about to say. Um, it comes down to the fact that if I didn't have these experiences,
Mm.
I wouldn't have confronted all of these things. Oh, now, okay, now it's back. Because when you're internal, that's when you're quiet. That's when you're facing all of these things. The other piece is reaching out for support, which is also, of course, incredibly valuable and needed in times of trauma. However, the external, or the perceived external, because I don't perceive actually anything to be outside of us, the
Mhm.
perceived external is something that can be helpful with resources, can be helpful with support, can be helpful in all of these different ways. And there is no resource that is a comparison for the resource that is you, for you, that is going in and getting quiet and facing. Because if you are going through something super easy and you have no worry and no care, and you're not thinking about other perspectives or other experiences or problem solving, then you're not expanding, you're not learning, you're not the whatever you want to call it, waking up or whatever. What it comes down to is we are remembering and receiving knowledge that we didn't previously remember or have, and we
Mhm.
are utilizing that to grow and expand into hopefully people that we perceive to be better, than who we were before.
So,
And
so why is it that you believe that you have to experience something traumatic in order to be able to access remembering what it is that you already are or who you already are, and why would you need that?
hmm, well, in my perspective and experience, if you are someone who has it really easy, then you're just kind of like on this path. Like you don't need to pay attention, right? Like, so if you are on a trip, we're on a road trip, Elizabeth. We're on a road trip right now. I have a
Okay.
horrible sense direction. Um, I don't know about you, but for me, like a map's not even gonna cut it. Like I need to have a map app that's gonna like scream at me, and then like even possibly have someone else who's like, yeah, this is what it's saying. You need to go this way. And that's a solution for a challenge that I have, right? To use a mapping thing. What do I learn from that process? I learn
Mhm.
resourcefulness. I learn how to accept something that some may perceive to be a flaw. I end up actually getting to a destination that I want to go to. I think that it's vastly underestimated that everywhere where we are in any moment is exactly where we are meant to be. So getting to a destination, different from a result. Getting to a destination is critical in my experience. And as we are all leading and going towards a direction, if we have an easy direction, but I have the best sense direction and I know where everything is, I don't have to think. It's automatic. It's like how we don't think
Mhm.
about breathing. But if I get choked, oh crap, like
You're thinking about it.
yeah, you're thinking about it. If
Yeah.
you're coughing, like, I'm asthmatic, so like maybe I think about it a little more, but I'm in my year of health and now I'm not thinking about it as much because I am purposely not, I'm training myself out of thinking about it,
Very nice.
which is awakening. So why does it matter? Because it's not that anybody, I don't want people to experience trauma. That's not what this is.
Mhm.
I want to be super clear about that. Do not misunderstand me, anybody. I know you're not. Anybody's listening
Yeah,
to this, do not
anybody
misunderstand.
listening.
Um, I've gone through a lot of different traumas and a lot of different types of pain.
Mhm.
And what I can tell you is that I don't wish these for anybody. What I understand is that every single thing that's ever been in my experience has helped me to become exactly who I need to be to even serve powerfully in this moment. Because honestly, humbly, I say that I don't know that everyone who has experienced even trauma that I'm experiencing now in the past number of hours would just be up here talking about trauma. But there's the amount of awakening that I've done and the choice and the power I believe I have from this process to serve that keeps me going.
Mhm. Yeah, I do have to agree with you that I feel like there has to be, um, well, I feel like we label things as trauma. Really, it comes down to your perception of what trauma is, and you can change your perception to, trauma isn't something that's bad and isn't something that is painful, or, all encompassing, takes over my life or anything like that. But that is something that we believe as a collective right now, that that's how trauma is. Um, and the way I see it is that in order to awaken more and more and more, you have to be able to see where your restrictions already are. And so in order to be able to notice those restrictions, you've got to bump up against them. And sometimes that looks really messy. And sometimes that, looks dark, or it feels in a way that we don't enjoy feeling all the time. that I feel like it's necessary for us to have that. It's an opportunity. So whenever we have any kind of trauma, it's an opportunity to take a deeper look at it and say, what is this teaching me about myself? What is this teaching me about the way that I'm looking at others, the way I'm treating others, the way I perceive relationships to be, or I perceive this in life to be, or this in life to be. And it's that opportunity to see those boundaries that we have already put up and to take them down so that the path is easier.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what it comes down to is everything is propelled faster. Our ascension is faster when we face these different things. And ultimately, we find ourselves happier because we're not bypassing our emotions and our experiences, which
Yeah.
inevitably blow up on every human at some point if they do that. So it's something to address. It's something to, as you said, the collective has this belief. And as long as the majority of the collective has the belief will hold. So, as I often say to people that for whatever reason, this is apparently very triggering. So it's a statement of love, but it's potentially gonna be triggering, so trigger warning. When I say that, yeah, when I say that literally the separation, major air quotes, the separation of humanity experiencing our consciousness within unconditional love is literally as fast as a choice that the majority of us make at one point, like in one moment, in one perceived moment. It could actually be as easy as the way that we see things go viral on social media, sort of
Mhm.
get a passion, and then someone puts a petition and expresses, whatever it is, and then people sign off on it, and whatever it may take off and actually make major change.
Mhm.
And it sounds radical. I understand. I have deep compassion for how radical it sounds. When you sit with that, though, isn't that the actual only missing thing? Isn't it actually that all that is different is the perspective and therefore the behavior? And if we can all agree that we want to hold that perspective, that we want to be unconditionally loving, that we want to feel unconditionally loved, that we want to live in a world
Mhm.
conditionally loving,
Yeah.
is that not enough? And
Yeah.
trauma gets us there.
Yeah, I feel like you bring up a really great point in trauma and in awakening as well, that you have to be ready to be able to see where those boundaries are. If you're not ready, you're not ready. You might only be ready to see like a little sliver of what's over here. And that's totally fine because that's what you were ready for and that's what you needed. When you're ready, you're going to be able to see, oh, there's a whole wall here, but I can't see how far it goes, and you'll be able to get into more details of what's really going on there. But how would you suggest to somebody who's in the midst of trauma to be able to start, how would you suggest that they start understanding what that's there to teach them?
Hmm. When I think about that for me, because actually no one's ever asked me that, and I'm really needing to like reflect it and to think about that. That's a great question. When I talk about like what my experience was and initially getting, being better and everything and all of that, my try awakening. I The word that always comes back up blaring in my face is desperation.
And that's how you felt in that. in that moment?
I was desperate. I felt desperate to get better, to have answers, to be able to serve, to have purpose. I was incredibly suicidal as far as I was concerned. If I couldn't serve, I didn't understand why I was here.
Yeah.
So it didn't make any sense to me. Of course, now it makes all the sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I had, and it didn't just make sense just because of like, oh, that one time Jamie was better. And like, no, like this has been years and years and years and years of like over and over and over and over and over again, the same crappy lessons that are not fun, but they are powerful. And they've brought me to this space. I do not hold the frequency of suffering. I'm not suffering. If you tell me that I'm suffering or you talk about me, and not you, Elizabeth, just royally you,
Yeah.
talk about me, in suffering, like I will shut that down because I'm not suffering. I'm not suffering. Pain is real.
Mhm.
It's real. Suffering is real, but these are still, pain and suffering are still filters.
Their perceptions.
Mhm. They're all filters. We have access to so many filters, and for some reason, we forgot about that. We forgot how many we have access to. We forgot how powerful we are in our ability to choose because we were programmed over and over and over and over and over again. You can't access fully of your brain, so we don't even know what you're capable of.
Yeah.
You're a kid. Sit down, shut up, be quiet. I mean, any marginalized being, like of any person of marginalized experience,
Mhm.
have, you know, this will come to a point of this tension. And when I think about people who've had it super easy, are these the people who are inspiring? Are these the people that are inspiring us to actually change? Or is it more inspiring to us when someone goes through something, especially that we might be able to relate to,
Mhm.
and overcome it?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember 4 years after my son died, I remember standing outside. I was walking my dog and it was sunny out and the wind was blowing. And I was just noticing like how the leaves were making noise and rustling together in the tree. And I realized I could live my life, the rest of my life this way, feeling extremely, extremely sad. And I would be okay. Or I could use what happened to make myself and my life so incredibly different and so incredibly better that I could never look back and totally 100,000% be sure that if I had the opportunity to be able to somehow make him live, that I would definitely pick that. I think there's a big, when you get that opportunity from trauma, there's a big choice there. And even if you don't choose, to find something or create something positive and transformational out of it, that opportunity, I don't think leaves. It's always there for you. So it doesn't even matter how long ago the trauma happened, the opportunity is always there for you to take it.
1000% agree with that, because I have taken so many opportunities way later. We act like every door closes. There are always more doors. There's always more
Mhm.
life. There's like, what you said was so powerful about the gift, because when we shift out of victimhood consciousness, we can see that. And it takes healing, it takes deep reflection.
Mhm.
Recently, actually, I was like going through a whole trauma, and I was asked, are you a victim? Why was I triggered by that? Excuse me, because see, throat chakra clearing, because I don't want to be a victim. And yet I couldn't find another, I realized that I was sitting in that frequency. I couldn't find another way around. And I needed to hear that. And it was, I mean, I had a big reaction to that for like, a good 24 hours probably. And after I really sat with it and meditated, I was like, wait, why am I like fighting for victimhood consciousness? Because that is what I'm doing. Like, why am I deciding for myself that that is what I'm experiencing and that is what I am? That's not the facts. That's the feeling and the experience and the expression. But that's not actually the facts of what happened. Now, where the facts of what happened, traumatic and everyone's experience involved 100%. However, when it comes down to different relationship dynamics, especially, whether you're related to them or not, you're going to come into a space where you face the construct, the way, the format, the way that you feel with this person, and you cross-reference with what it is that you truly want. Now, I was clear that I didn't want victimhood consciousness, and notice how I had a very big contraction and expansion by someone who cared deeply of me, and this was like months ago, and it's still very impactful because I'm sharing it now. So sometimes in trauma we might feel triggered. That could be a part of the healing. What if we actually removed the word triggering? Like, what if triggering was no longer a word that humanity used? What if victimhood was no longer a word that humanity used? And instead, we spoke about the facts. XYZ happened. I feel this way. I don't want this. I don't want this. This is what I need to feel safe.
So you're saying taking like the blame out of it.
Yeah.
That's big.
It's very big. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but that's not what we sign up for with transformation. And it can be easy by you choosing the filter of ease.
Yeah. So how do you suggest, say someone realizes they have a judgment filter, how would you suggest that they shift to a filter of ease and a filter of, I guess, acceptance, rather than judgment?
It's a great question. The first thing I want to say is there's nothing right or wrong with having a judgment filter. I also want to say that I don't believe that human beings are capable of initially existing without one. I think it is a very big part of why the ego is powerful. And I believe that it's a huge part of, actually, it's interesting because this is coming through now. I believe that essentially judgment has enabled an immense amount of expansion because we came in at large into this world, many of us feeling, most of us at least being taught that we're separate, that we're separated, and that we're not, like, it's not about a better than or less than, we're just different. It's just, that's how it is. In terms of how to do it, it's a process. It's a process. First of all, you have to stop bypassing. And I rarely use the have to statement, although if you can figure out how to do healing on an emotional, mental, spiritual level without bypassing, I'll eat this shirt live on the next. So that's how confident, that's how confident I am. And the reality is this is like how much you want it. And how much you want it is going to come to how much your self-worth is. And that's going to directly connect to whether you decide to enter in and stay in the victimhood. So the first thing is acknowledging. Acknowledge, aware, stop bypassing. This happened to you.
Mhm.
It happened. And you were a part of it. And how it came here and how you manifest it into your life and whatever, it's not about the how. It's the why. And that's what you have to stop bypassing. So you get quiet in whatever way that means for you. Go to therapy if that's what resonates with you. I love therapy.
Mhm.
Talk a lot of trauma in therapy. It's pretty much what 99% of my trauma, or 99% of my therapy is used for that.
Yeah.
You know, find community, go to support group. You know, like this is like, there's this major misunderstanding that I feel called to really clarify right now around doing things alone, being alone, and what it means that you're never alone. Yes, there are things that you need to do that are going to feel alone. And yes, there are people that also are your reflections in the collective who are here to support you. It's a yes and to all of these things.
Yeah.
This process isn't about bypassing your experience. It's about transforming your narrative, because the beings that did whatever they did, you don't need to be in that frequency. You don't need to have that experience going forward. You already had it. And there's a lot of us that are telling ourselves on a soul level, I need this. I need to do this. I've got this soul contract. And it's all of this pressure.
Are
Allow
you
for things to unfold. Go ahead.
are you saying that to repeat the same lessons and to just so basically to stay in the cycle and in the loop of the same types of trauma or the same lesson coming in slightly different ways over and over and over?
That's definitely a huge part of how the acceleration happens in terms of the actual healing of it. Yeah, you have to. I mean, there's a reason why there's God, of course it just escaped my mind. Exposure therapy. For those who aren't familiar, like, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not gonna like speak some expert way of this, but like in short, all you need to know is the exposure therapy is when you have a trauma, the concept is quite simple. You recreate the trauma in some way that can be safe so you can unlearn it. So it's not that you're actually like, you know, if you're experiencing sexual trauma, let's go get like, let's ask for that and invite that in. That's not what that is.
Mhm.
Might go into therapy and perhaps do something like EMDR therapy and perhaps be brought back. You know, if you are with me, like I bring you through a visualization, you know, we go right back there. The point is that you need to go back there, because there isn't actually a back, there isn't actually a forward, there isn't actually a sideways. These are all things that we perceive where frequencies flowing around. You have so much power and control, and you're deciding that you don't because you're going through these experiences and you're telling yourself that you're not worthy because you're going through these experiences, and you're telling yourself that you're a victim because you're going through these experiences. And society has told you over and over and over and over and over again, this is how this is. So of course, this is what your filter is. Of course, this is what you're experiencing. Of course, you're finding it challenging to come out of this and to slip out of it. There's so much on the other side, and the other side is there, and it looks different for everybody. What are your goals around your trauma? What are your goals around your awakening? If you're not spiritual and you have zero desire to ascend, and you're like totally okay with your life and all the trauma and victimhood, like, cool,
Yeah.
that's your life. Like, you're part of the one. I care about you. I wish that you weren't doing this, both for you and for the collective. And also, I deeply respect it.
Mhm.
But you don't have to do that.
So while
Yeah.
you were talking, you know, you mentioned that there isn't any going back, and there really isn't any like future. That's all just right now. So when you have worked on your trauma, do you, and while you're working on changing the narrative around it, do you send energy to yourself in other times? Because that's something that I just recently started doing, is going back into certain childhood things and re-experiencing them and sending energy into that experience, but also communicating with myself in that experience to shift my mindset as to how things were being perceived for me in that moment.
I love that. Yes, 100%. When we go to the depths of that space, it uncovers so much, because we become our own parent.
Mhm.
And that is what I believe personally that everyone needs, because I rarely hear my parents were perfect and amazing. Like, to be totally frank, there's a famous person that I follow, Gary Vee, like, who I love, and he's the only person when I can think of someone saying my parents are like perfect and everything was this,
Mhm.
like, and he had very unique experience that many people would be like, they're not perfect. But he's the first person I think of, and I can't think of anybody that I even personally know who feels that way. I don't feel that way about mine. I'm
Yeah.
going through all sorts of trauma healing with my parents right now.
Yeah.
Take it moment by moment. It's like a lot of people, well, intention right now in the trauma that I'm currently facing of a sexual trauma that has danger.
Mhm.
There are people that are well-intentioned and focusing on the future, like focusing on like, what are the next 10 steps? Right? Like, because I feel unsafe in my apartment and I want to change my situation.
Mhm.
Um, and this all started last night into today. So everyone knows, if you're telling yourself a narrative of like, I'm going through some massive trauma and I'm just going to fall apart and do nothing, this is why the lessons happen over and over again, because it's not my first radio with that type of trauma. It's not my first time at all. And I've lived it over and over and over again. And there was a part of me that started crying last night, being like, why am I doing this right now?
Yeah.
And I got answers. And, it's always because there are things that are more to heal and there's more to serve. And my truth is that I call in experiences, whether I consciously say so or not, that are going to help me expand to be in the deep service, because there's nothing that remotely matters to me in anything at all than my purpose, which is to anchor the remembrance of unconditional love back into Gaia and the collective. And so, anyway, back to where we are in trauma right now. It's because I have lived this so many times,
Mhm.
different ways, that I feel like I'm behaving this way right now. Like, I didn't shrink into myself from more than, like, I think seconds, honestly. I don't remember how fast, but I started to
Wow.
out immediately to people. That is the polar opposite of what my usual trauma response would be,
Yeah.
which
So
is, I'm not going to tell no one, I'm going to deal with it myself.
you've practiced.
I practiced,
Yeah.
or I lived,
Yeah. Yeah.
I experienced.
Yeah.
It allowed me to get the support that I need and to go within. Is this like over? No. However, I use my resources, I use my wits, I set my boundaries with people. I told them, this is where I am now, this is what I need now, this is the thing I'm focusing on now.
Mhm.
You can do this. Like, you legitimately can do this. I'm not bedridden. I'm in my year of health. I have been transitioning. I have abundance and happiness and joy in my life. I made radical shifts in a matter of minutes. Like when you think about it, we have so much obsession in humanity with this shift of a second between December 31st and January 1st. Like, I want to be super clear right now. You're making a resolution based on a second that has been decided that that is the most important second, and all the pressure is to be placed in this time where you make all of these commitments for an entire year, potentially your lifetime, when you have no idea what's going to happen. I would
Mhm.
love for all of you to put in the comments what happened when you set intentions for your New Year's resolution in 2020 and then the pandemic happened. How'd that go for you? Because it was not fun for me. my all of that is tanked. All my plans. I wasted so much time. So much time. There's no time wasted when it comes to healing with trauma, so long as you choose to heal your trauma. All you need to do right now, if you have not healed any of your trauma, if you've not addressed your trauma, I invite you to place your hand on your heart and your left on your lower sacral and say, I trust myself, I love myself, and I am thriving through my trauma. I am unconditionally loving, and my trauma is a lesson and a gift and an awareness that I will use to live the best life possible. Because I don't know about all of you, but I was deeply inspired by Elizabeth's share to looking out the window and feeling sadness on something so monumental, and then saying, is that how I want to live my life? I can actually make my life the best life possible.
Yeah.
It can be done. We are examples.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It is possible to experience what feels like your entire life and yourself is being ripped apart, and to also later experience it as something that you are actually thankful for. And it's interesting that you said that when you did that little meditation, I forget what you said, I'm doing something through this.
You're
Uh
talking about for like
what
with us?
No, what you just said, like where you had us put our hand on our heart, and
Oh, yes,
you
this is
said,
my
well, you said something like I'm had us say I'm doing something through this. I forget what you said,
I'm
but
thriving through my trauma.
thriving. So I tell my clients to say, I am loving myself through this. So that's interesting that we've got some similar words to use.
Well, that's what I use for me, but it doesn't usually, interestingly, it's not yet resonating with clients I'm attracting. They're not there yet. So
Yeah.
they hear me say it. However, I like to meet my clients where they are,
Mhm.
like I think that's amazing if your clients are, are there and there's nothing right or wrong with
Mhm.
being in either space. However, I find them, you know, especially if you're talking to someone who's dealt with trauma around love,
Yeah.
that word has a different weight and it has a different ability to transmute and harmonize pain and perception of suffering and this and the other.
Yeah.
Uh, I believe that loving through is the answer to literally everything. And it has changed my life to use that phrasing.
Mhm.
I rarely slip out of it. And I have found myself to anchor more into my true love. I took selfies in the mirror yesterday and I was like, yeah, okay. Like, hey, you're here. You're here. Like, you know, it's the little things. Trauma is a big thing. And oftentimes we can look at something big and say, we need something big to fix something big. I
Mhm.
actually don't always agree with that. I actually think that that's less sustainable less achievable in a way that is fast, less accessible to more people to do it that way. I believe that it's a gazillion little things.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different every day. Some days are going to feel painful and you're just going to be crying and like whatever, like do that. You're releasing. Crying is such a strength. It's so beautiful. I love crying. In fact, I actually
Yes.
freak out when I don't cry. And when I was going through traumas, when I was early in my transition and I started using testosterone, it's incredibly common that you like can't cry. And I'm a crybaby, proudly. So what happened was something rather scary for me because
Yeah.
look, I'm a pacifist, and my least favorite thing is to be in anger.
Um,
And and there's this big narrative about trans people who go through testosterone, and it's like it's going to make you angry, it's going to make you aggressive, it's going to make you all these things. No, it's a hormone that's shifting, and like hormones do, they're impactful, and you're pubescent, and if you've
mm,
spent a lot of your life with access to this massive release mechanism, to this
yeah.
massive understanding of the whole crayon box, right? Every crayon, every emotion, and the
Yeah.
big one now, I don't know, hundreds
Like
of
the jumbo packs.
big,
Yeah.
like to the things that are, if you only have a couple crayons, like, so I got angry. I was so angry. And I knew that I was angry, and I knew
Uh,
why I was angry. I was like, I'm angry because I'm not able to release.
yeah.
Here's what that did. It woke me up to how powerful my emotions are. And I learned that my emotions are my superpower. I learned that my crying was my strength. I learned that when I share that I cry, especially how people perceive me in my presentation now, that it makes waves.
Mm,
So I learned so much, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that I can cry again. I'm
yeah.
so grateful. If all of that didn't happen, and testosterone has been saving my life, I'm more in alignment than ever. And that means that I am able to be in my unconditional love. I'm able to serve with unconditional love. I'm able to be unconditional love. Unconditional love is not about you loving yourself to the depths of yourself in every moment and every second. You're like, I'm the greatest. That's not what it actually is. Unconditional love means that there's no construct. There's no boundaries, not in the sense of disrespecting someone's boundaries. There's no boundaries in the sense of barriers. And I bring that up because oftentimes we create boundaries that are actually barriers. And we make it harder for ourselves. And we slow ourselves down by doing this. And when we actually love ourselves unconditionally, regardless of how we show up, regardless of who we are. Like, full disclosure, like, we're late for this live, right? Like, I was late because I was going through this whole thing and I was totally out of integrity what was happening, even though I was literally talking about how, like, I can't talk to you right now, even though you're trying to help me with this thing. So things happen. And like, if I may, Elizabeth, like, I was really committed to be here. I was really committed to be here because I care about this, because I love unconditionally all of you,
Mhm.
because I honor and respect Elizabeth, and I think this is amazing, and this conversation is important, and I wanted to be here to do it. And I was out of integrity. And in my mind, once upon a time, I would have created a whole narrative. Oh my God, I've ruined my entire friendship with Elizabeth. Oh my God, no one's ever going to see me
Oh,
as
wow.
accountable again. These are all things that I used to be.
Yeah.
And instead, I came in and I saw the gift. I saw how much what I was experiencing needed to be shared. And Elizabeth still offered me the option to not do the live. And I still felt such a strong calling to do it. The point is that you may be telling yourself, I'm not worthy of support. I'm too much. Uh, this person's going through something too, so they can't support me. Like
That's
I
a
made,
good one.
all of these different stories and narratives that you're telling yourselves, those are not boundaries that you're honoring of other people when they haven't set them. Those are barriers from all the resources you ever needed that are still within you to go through your trauma and to love through. Look at us. We're sharing.
I think it's really interesting how you've how you've talked about the difference between putting up boundaries compared to putting up barriers. And a lot of my life, I wasn't even good at putting up boundaries, so I think there was a point in my life where if I put anything up, it was a barrier, but even then I would take the barrier down and, that type of thing. And when it comes to loving people, I have very, very, very few, if any, barriers. And it makes people uncomfortable who don't understand that, because they don't understand how could you love that person and know, like how horrible they are or whatever it is, or how could you love somebody that hurt you, or how could you still do that. And it's really interesting. I've been realizing over the past few years that a lot of people do see barriers as boundaries. They're blocking love, and in blocking that, they're saying, well, that's my boundary. You can have a boundary and still love the person. You can have a boundary and say, this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not okay with, and I will not engage unless my boundary is respected. And even if they cross it, you can still put up an even stricter boundary and still love them.
Mm-hmm. The last thing that I texted to this person was something along the lines of, this is clearly something that's about you. Respectfully, I love you unconditionally, and I wish that you get the healing that you need.
Yeah.
And
so I want to make it clear to any I want to make it clear to anyone that's listening, this is regarding the trauma that started for him last night. And he's been able to get himself to a point where he can actually tell the person that's involved in this, I unconditionally love you, and I hope the best for you.
And I mean it. That's a wild thing.
Yeah.
I surprised myself.
And that didn't happen overnight, did it, Jamie?
No, it didn't. It feels like it happened overnight because this all happened starting last night, but it did not. It did not. It happened throughout all of this. And my trauma, my earliest memory of trauma, I was 4.5. I was dying of pneumonia in the hospital for 10 days.
Oh,
and that is where, in this lifetime, my earliest remembrance consciously of a serious trauma that I had gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself, it's like when you look back at other traumas you've had, especially even similar traumas, the way that you react and the things that you carry, like once you get that clarity, when you go in and you figure that out and you get that clarity, that's how you can see what's true. That's how you can see what your narrative then was. No one's expecting you to share the narrative that you had in that traumatic experience, especially as a child, the way that you do now. That's why we need to be our own parents, because that version of Jamie, I have no actual visual remembrance, even though I can remote view into the room, into my hospital room, what it looks like. I have zero vision of anybody being with me, even though I know that wasn't true, because it's the hospital.
Wow.
I'm a 4.5-year-old dying of pneumonia. But also, my parents were there, and the person who was there with me most was who I referred to affectionately then as my Nana. And I carried with me for, let's see, wait, when did I do Landmark? Just before the pandemic, I started. 3 years ago, something like that. So I'm turning 34 in March. You do the math, I suck at math. That's a long time. So the narrative that I carried with myself was, I'm always alone. I'm not worthy of support and being cared for. I felt this incredible confusion,
Mm-hmm.
all these ways energetically. I felt lost. I felt terrified.
Mm-hmm.
All these things. Do you know what that manifested as? This is actually something that I don't talk about. So this is pretty vulnerable even for me. When I would get sick, especially when I got 9 years ago, and especially when I would get nauseous,
Mm-hmm.
vomiting, I would regress back to 4.5-year-old Jamie. I would talk like 4.5 Jamie. I would require the needs that a 4.5-year-old Jamie would need.
Wow.
Right back. And how did I change all of this so that this is much less so? Now I rarely have such an intense experience that I can't love myself through on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Within this type of thing. But what got me there was therapy. I had to talk to every single person over and over and over and over again for years until I believed them, years until I started to believe them,
Yeah.
years. And my healing of my health journey in part has to do with my ability to believe that I healed from that, to believe that I had that support. And what did I make that mean? I translated to any time that I needed support, especially around my health, when I felt confused and afraid and alone, which, I mean, how often do we have these experiences around trauma? Like they're like all of them.
Yeah.
Like even if you go through trauma with a family, you don't all experience it the same way.
Exactly.
So I mean, the other person who was around for part of this dynamic that happened, like, he seems fine. Like he's having a totally different response to all of this than I
Yeah.
am. So everyone reacts different. Everyone heals different. Everyone shifts different. What's the same is that you are a divine, powerful co-creator, that you are unconditionally loved, that you are on a planet that is here to serve you with infinite abundance, that I encourage you to consider and contemplate and sit with, that you have been programmed so much to be afraid. And if you go inside of yourself and if you talk to your highest self or whatever it is that resonates there, and you start to call in people who are in your frequency, and you start to heal this, you're going to see things very differently. You're going to feel things very differently. And your whole life is going to shift, because what you believe is your life.
Yeah.
Period. What you believe is your life.
Yep.
I only believe that this is all happening right now. And to me, this is happening in my reality, because like I believe that I'm here talking to Elizabeth and like to an audience that may hear this.
Yeah.
What else is here to prove that other than a perception from people that we are here?
Exactly.
Your trauma can be removed, can be healed, and can be left behind. And you will awaken, whatever that means for you. You're going to start to hear me using a very different word. I've been using a very different phrase recently, but it has to do with my big rebrand. So I'm not going to be announcing that right now, but very soon you will hear me using a very different word than awakening. And the hint is that I've already been using this word around. So if you resonate with it and you hear it, then it may find you, but it's going to shock. It's going to shock.
That's awesome.
Going to be a shift, and it's going to be a shift that's in alignment with this conversation and in alignment what I believe is truly necessary for us
Mhm.
to have that remembrance, because that's all that it is. It's all that it is. And honestly, like theoretically, even if you all don't believe me, which I don't need you to, but even if you don't believe me, especially about the unconditional love thing, and you humored me within the 30 seconds it would take for us to all intentionally in the moment make this choice.
Mhm.
You got something to lose? Is that going to hurt you? Or do you want to find out what's truly possible for our collective? I'm not wearing masks anymore. I'm not playing small anymore. And anybody who's in my vicinity, I invite you to join me.
Where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you?
You can find me anywhere that is Tranibus Chi, so TRANNABISCHI. I'm pretty much on every platform. I love getting messages. I love being reached out to. Right now, my biggest booking is heal.me/Tranibus Chi. So you can, if you want to talk about this and you want support from someone who's done it, I'm here. And, Molly, speaking for Elizabeth, she's incredibly gifted. I know from experience, she's here too. It's why we're having this conversation. There was
Exactly.
I couldn't have this conversation today because I need to prove to you. Because, right, would you believe me if I said a whole story of rape and all this stuff, and I was just like, I told them I love them unconditionally. I'm already taking actions. I reached out all these resources, and that I wasn't a victim? What? No way. I wouldn't believe myself. You needed to hear me and see me. So find me. I'm here to be found. And the spoiler is that you are already found. And I love you unconditionally, regardless of how you feel about this, regardless of whether you disagree with me, even if you want to try to cause me harm, because you are me for me. And it does no service for me to hate myself, hate us. I'm going to keep anchoring. And if you all keep putting up boundaries that are barriers, every light healer, every coach, every therapist, every person who's attempting to hold this high frequency for you, friction. So if you don't want to look at this inside and you don't feel worthy inside, think about everyone else. Know that you are worthy, that I see you for exactly who you are. You are divine and perfect. Everything that has happened, even if you've called this into your life, it's not about what's happened to you. It's what you do now and who you are being. And the biggest gift is who you become. And I leave you with that. I'm so thankful and grateful for this time. I love
Yes.
being with you, as always.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I feel like we covered so many different aspects of trauma and awakening and, your experiences with it. And I'm very, very grateful for your wisdom and your willingness to get on this call with me.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing me and for asking me.
Yes. So I will put the links to contact Jamie if you want to contact him in the comments, and I will be back on next week, same time, Wednesdays, 11 a.m. EST, and I will see you guys later. Bye.